Have you ever felt completely wanted one moment and then like a total stranger the next? One night, you're the whole center of someone's world, and by the next morning, it's as if you never existed to them at all. That whiplash, that emotional seesaw, isn't love. It's a setup. Underneath that charm and that easy smile sits something far darker than most people expect. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on 5 things about sex and intimacy that narcissists work hard to keep hidden. Once you see them clearly, you'll never look at this kind of person the same way again. Between two people who genuinely care about each other, sex can be one of the deepest forms of connection there is. It builds trust, closeness, a real sense of emotional safety. But with a narcissist, that same act becomes something else entirely. A strategic tool, cold and calculated underneath the heat. It stops being about affection or shared closeness and becomes a weapon instead. Narcissists understand exactly how powerful sex is. They know it creates emotional bonds, floods the body with feel-good chemistry, and makes a person feel attached and safe. But rather than honoring that power, they bend it to their advantage. Every touch, every glance carries a hidden agenda, not love, but leverage. In the beginning, being with a narcissist feels like being swept away. It's intense, magnetic, almost overwhelming, and you might genuinely believe you've stumbled into the strongest connection of your life. But none of that intensity is accidental. It's deliberate. The narcissist is using sexual energy, the same way they use flattery and attention, to hook you quickly, build fast emotional dependence, and lower every defense you have. You start associating their touch with love, their attention with your own worth, their presence with feeling secure. What looks like passion is actually conditioning, and slowly, almost invisibly, that passion stops being unconditional. It becomes a reward you earn or a privilege withheld, depending on your compliance. Eventually, you notice the shift. The closeness stops feeling mutual and starts feeling like a one-person show. Feed their ego, make them feel powerful, and you're showered with affection. Express a need of your own, or push back even slightly, and the warmth vanishes instantly. It's a rhythm of pulling close and pushing away, offered when they want control, withdrawn when they want you anxious, and scrambling for their approval. This is where intimacy folds into the larger cycle of control. Narcissists frequently use physical closeness to reset the emotional temperature after conflict. They might initiate sex right after an argument, not out of guilt or care, but purely to regain the upper hand, a way of proving I decide when we reconnect. It clouds your thinking, softens your anger, blurs the memory of whatever hurt just happened. You start second-guessing yourself. Maybe I did overreact. Maybe they really do care. That's precisely the trap. They never have to actually apologize if pleasure can erase the memory of pain. That's how you stay tangled in the confusion. Even more damaging is how they weaponize distance. Suddenly they go cold, stop reaching for you, pull affection away with zero explanation, leaving you to wonder what you possibly did wrong. Then, right as you start to let go, they come roaring back, intense, attentive, completely irresistible again. That push and pull is what keeps you hooked, endlessly chasing the version of them that first made you feel alive. Except that version was never real. It was a performance, rehearsed and deliberate. That early emotional high wasn't connection. It was bait. And this entire pattern leaves lasting damage, teaching you to associate love with pain, passion with fear, closeness with anxiety. That's the quiet power of their sexual manipulation. It was never really about the act itself. It's about how thoroughly it can control your emotions. They don't want your heart. They want to own it. And the cruelest part is how they turn your own natural longing for closeness into the very leash that keeps you tethered. There's a reason this cycle feels so disorienting rather than simply painful. If a narcissist were cold from the start, you'd walk away easily. Instead, they alternate warmth and distance in a rhythm just unpredictable enough to keep your nervous system locked in anticipation, always hoping the next moment brings back the version of them you fell for. That unpredictability isn't carelessness. It's the exact mechanism that keeps you invested. the same mechanism that keeps anyone hooked on anything intermittent, never knowing when the reward will come, only that it might. Meeting a narcissist can feel like stepping straight into a dream. The way they look at you, talk to you, touch you, it feels electric, almost like fate. But that feeling is exactly why it's suspicious. It's too perfect. Narcissists are skilled illusionists, and their sharpest trick is overwhelming you fast, flooding you with attention, praise, and desire until you're emotionally dependent before you've even noticed. None of it is real connection. It's calculated. Underneath the charisma, there's no real depth, only strategy. In that early phase, they mirror you. They echo your values, your dreams, your worldview back at you, so it feels like you've finally found someone who truly understands you. They talk about destiny, about forever, about how rare this connection is. They text constantly, hunt for your time, tell you you're unlike anyone they've ever known. None of this springs from real feeling. It's engineered to bypass your defenses, to sweep you into an intensity so overwhelming you skip the normal, slower process of building actual trust. Sex is a huge part of that illusion. It's passionate, frequent, emotionally loaded. They'll say things like, "I've never felt this close to anyone," or "nobody else gets me the way you do." But that intensity isn't proof of love. It's manipulation. They're using sex to lock in emotional dependency. The chemicals released during intimacy, oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins, make you feel bonded and euphoric, and your brain quietly links all of that pleasure to them. Once that bond takes hold, controlling you becomes far easier. Once they sense your loyalty is secure, everything shifts. The warmth cools, effort drops off, messages slow down, compliments dry up. The passion that once felt endless becomes rare and occasional. Where they used to celebrate everything unique about you, they start pointing out flaws instead. The person who once made you feel extraordinary now leaves you feeling confused and not good enough. Ask why, and they flip it back on you. You're imagining things. You're too emotional. You're overthinking everything. They gaslight you until you no longer trust your own memory. And then comes the hard truth. The person you fell for was never really there. That intense connection you believed in wasn't love. It was a carefully built trap. The love bombing wasn't devotion. It was bait meant to pull you in deep before the mask came off. By the time you notice what's happening, you're already emotionally caught, questioning yourself, craving the validation they once gave so freely. That early affection was never genuine. It was a setup, and they knew exactly what they were doing the whole time. Narcissists don't enter relationships for the reasons healthy people do. Most people want closeness, understanding, mutual support. Narcissists want admiration. Not love, not partnership, just a steady stream of attention to feed a fragile self-image. Their hunger for control shapes every part of the relationship, especially the sexual and emotional parts. To them, real intimacy is dangerous. Vulnerability means exposure, and being truly known threatens the polished mask they wear. Deep down, they're terrified of being ordinary or unworthy, so genuine closeness gets avoided at all costs. Sex with a narcissist might feel consuming at first, but it was never about mutual pleasure. It's a performance, and they're the only star. If they seem attentive, it's usually because they want to be told how amazing they are, not because your satisfaction matters to them. They feed on praise, on hearing how irresistible and unforgettable they are. The instant that praise stops, or attention shifts toward you instead, their interest evaporates. Sexual connection, like every other form of attention, is just another mechanism for feeding their ego. Once it's served that purpose, it stops meaning anything. What makes it even more painful is what happens the moment real intimacy threatens to surface. Genuine closeness needs honesty and emotional give and take, exactly the things narcissists can't tolerate because they can't handle real vulnerability. The instant you reach for that emotional depth, they pull back or change the subject. Real intimacy cracks their mask, so they replace it with control, criticism, or cold withdrawal. That's the heartbreaking truth of loving a narcissist. You offer your whole heart hoping to build something real, and all they take is admiration, validation, and control. To them, love isn't partnership, it's ownership. Until you see that clearly, you'll stay stuck in the cycle, always reaching for warmth that was never anything more than a tool. They're often either unwilling or genuinely incapable of real emotional give. They withdraw, detach, sometimes even sabotage the connection outright. Sometimes they'll mock or minimize moments of vulnerability with sarcasm, silence, or cold indifference, just to create distance. When you try to go deeper, to share your feelings or really open up, they treat it like weakness or make you feel like you're asking for too much. That reaction isn't random, it's a defense. They cannot tolerate emotional exposure, so they devalue it, reject it, twist the moment until you feel embarrassed for wanting closeness in the first place. In relationships like this, people often end up emotionally starved. You can be lying right next to them and still feel completely alone. You share a bed but feel no real bond. Try to have a genuine conversation about love or growth or connection, and you're met with blank stares, half-hearted answers, or ridicule. Slowly, this absence of real intimacy becomes disorienting. You start wondering why someone who once seemed completely obsessed with you has turned so distant, and you begin questioning yourself instead. Maybe I'm too emotional, too needy, expecting too much. But the truth isn't that you're asking for too much. It's that they never intended to give it in the first place. To a narcissist, relationships aren't partnerships, they're transactions. They give just enough to keep you close, to preserve the illusion, and to protect their supply of admiration. But once the novelty fades or their attention drifts, they start hunting for new ways to feed their ego. It's not unusual for them to flirt elsewhere, chase outside attention, or deliberately stir up jealousy just to create chaos, because anything that puts them at the center feels like power, and that's what they crave most. So while you're longing for real warmth and connection, the narcissist simply isn't built for that. They don't want to be known. They want to be admired. The closer you try to get to their real self, the further they retreat, because genuine intimacy demands honesty. And that's a mask they're terrified to remove. Withholding affection is one of their quietest, most effective weapons. It rarely looks dramatic. Sometimes it's just silence, distance, a cold shoulder that fills the room with tension, a sudden shift from warmth to ice with no explanation at all, leaving you disoriented and wondering what went wrong. This isn't passive behavior, it's deliberate. When a narcissist pulls affection away, it's almost never because they've stopped caring. It's because they want to destabilize you. They know exactly how much you crave closeness, and taking it away is how they gain the upper hand. Early on, they may have overwhelmed you with affection, every word and gesture making you feel chosen and adored. But once they know you're emotionally invested, they start pulling back. Compliments become rare. Intimacy starts to feel forced. Sometimes it vanishes altogether. They stop initiating contact, avoid eye contact, seem distracted whenever you try to get close. Ask what's wrong, and they brush it off. Tired, stressed, not in the mood. Over time, a pattern emerges. Affection only reappears once you've met their expectations. This cycle breeds anxiety and dependency. One day you feel adored. The next you feel invisible. You start tying their affection directly to your own behavior, replaying conversations, dissecting every word and gesture, wondering what pushed them away, sometimes apologizing for things you never even did just to earn the warmth back. That's exactly the response they're engineering. You end up walking on eggshells, working harder and harder to reclaim something that used to come effortlessly. And that effort is exactly what keeps them in control and keeps you chasing. Sex becomes another lever in this system. They might use it to reel you back in the moment they sense you slipping away, or they might withhold it completely as a form of punishment or dominance. Suddenly, they're too tired, too busy, not interested, because they know that denying physical closeness can wound just as deeply as harsh words. Their body becomes a tool, something to offer or withhold, something used to make you question your own worth. What makes it worse is their flat refusal to acknowledge any of it. They act like nothing has changed. And when you bring it up, they call you needy or insecure. This gaslighting leaves you doubting your own perception, wondering if maybe you really are being unreasonable, if your need for connection really is too much. Eventually, you learn to silence your own needs just to avoid conflict, and that silence hands them complete control. They decide when closeness happens, when affection returns, when peace exists. Over time, the relationship starts to feel hollow, like living through a permanent emotional winter, trying to stay warm off memories that went cold long ago. The same person who once made you feel deeply seen now makes you feel invisible, and yet you keep holding on, hoping the warmth comes back. This slow withdrawal is such a subtle form of control that by the time you recognize the pattern, you're already deep inside it, kept uncertain and emotionally dependent on purpose. Jealousy is another tool they wield with real skill. In a healthy relationship, jealousy is occasional, human, nothing sinister. With a narcissist, it's never accidental. It's strategy. They deliberately manufacture situations that make you feel insecure, unwanted, replaceable, all to keep you anxious, striving, endlessly reaching for their approval. Because when you're busy doubting yourself, you're not busy questioning them. And when you're desperate for their attention, they know they've got full control. At first, they might make you feel like the only person who matters. Then small shifts appear, an ex mentioned a little too often, a coworker discussed in a way that makes you uneasy, flirting right in front of you, or compliments handed to someone else's looks while you stand there watching. It feels deliberate because it is. Narcissists enjoy watching the reaction, your unease, your hurt, your jealousy, because it proves you care and it feeds their ego. Confront them, and they play innocent, insisting you're imagining things, being dramatic, overly sensitive. They laugh it off, roll their eyes, act offended you'd even bring it up. That's gaslighting in real time. You sense something's wrong, but they talk you out of trusting that instinct until you start wondering if it really is all in your head, if maybe you're the jealous one. As your confidence erodes, their behavior gets bolder. More opportunities for jealousy appear, small comments, lingering looks, suggestive stories about people who find them attractive, always subtle enough to deny but pointed enough to sting. When you finally react, they flip the script entirely. Why are you so jealous? Don't you trust me? You're imagining things again. Your pain becomes evidence of your own instability. And instead of holding them accountable, you end up apologizing for simply feeling hurt. That's the whole trap. You start feeling ashamed of your own emotions, tiptoeing around them, trying to look calm and easygoing instead of clingy, trying to prove you trust them even while every instinct screams otherwise. Meanwhile, they grow bolder, confident you won't leave, confident you'll keep working to win their approval. It was never really about attraction to someone else. It's about power over you. They don't necessarily want that other person. They want you to feel replaceable, to feel reminded that they could walk away anytime. That fear keeps you on edge, keeps you chasing the version of them that once made you feel secure, so that any small crumb of attention or affection feels like a victory you've earned. That cycle, you starving for connection while they hold every key, is exactly what keeps you trapped. It also helps to understand why walking away feels so much harder than it should. Part of you isn't grieving the person in front of you. You're grieving the version they performed in the beginning, the one who felt like the answer to everything you'd been missing. That version was real enough to feel, even if it was never real in the way it mattered. Mourning something that was staged doesn't make the grief any less genuine. It just means the grief is aimed at an illusion instead of a person, which is exactly why it's so hard to let go, and why healing usually requires accepting that the person you loved was, in large part, a performance built to keep you exactly where you are. You start losing yourself in it, shaping your behavior around their moods, comparing yourself to others, endlessly wondering what you did wrong. You feel anxious around them, but even more anxious without them, an emotional gravity constantly pulling you back, no matter how much it hurts. And that's the cruelest part of all. Narcissists don't control you through grand gestures. They do it through quiet emotional conditioning, through silence, through manufactured jealousy, through the careful withdrawal of love. You end up loving someone who makes you feel small, invisible, and endlessly in need of their approval. But that isn't love. It's dependency, built entirely out of control, confusion, and fear.